and welcome back to a very belated edition of Hockey Talkie. My name is Clay. Thank you for tuning in. I've been meaning to do this video for quite a long time, pretty much since the beginning of the year. Yeah, it's that late. Just never got around to it. Just kept putting it off. No real excuse, just never got it done. So apologies about that, but hey, here we are. We're gonna get it done right now. That's right, this video we're going to be previewing the upcoming Seattle Kraken expansion draft for the NHL's 32nd franchise. We're going to talk about the Blackhawks' place in that draft, who I think is going to be protected, who I think will then be exposed, and then who I think the Kraken will be taking from the Chicago Blackhawks. We're going to talk about all of that, but before we get into it, I do need to give a very special shout out to the newest Patreon superfan of this channel, Tyler Aven. Thank you so very much for going above and beyond to support me in this channel. I cannot tell you how much that means to me to not only support this channel by watching, subscribing, interacting, but then taking that next step and supporting monetarily. Like, that's just bonkers to me. So thank you so very much. If anyone else is interested in doing what Tyler has done, there is a link to the Patreon page down in the description. It's completely optional, but check it out if you are interested. Once again, Tyler, thank you. You're awesome. All right, let's talk expansion draft. Same rules as the Vegas Golden Knights draft, just slight tweakage, very minor tweakage to the rules, and it's all really because of the shortened season this year. Due to the pandemic, instead of having an 82-game season, we had a 56-game season. So there are exposure requirements for players. They had to play a certain amount of games this season or the previous 2 seasons to be then eligible to be exposed in this draft. Because of the shortened season this year, 56 games instead of 82, those numbers of games were just brought down a little bit. That's really the only tweak. It really doesn't affect a whole lot. Teams will once again have the option of either protecting 11 players or 9 players. The 11-player route requires 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goaltender to be protected. The 9-player route requires a goaltender to be protected and then 8 additional skaters, any mix of forwards and defensemen. So 9-player route is a little bit more flexible, but you only get to protect 9 players instead of 11. So most teams go with the 7-3-1 route, the 11-player route. That's what the Blackhawks did in the Vegas draft. I expect them to do the same in the Seattle draft. But before we talk about who I think the Blackhawks will protect in this upcoming expansion draft, let's go through the players who are going to be exempt from this draft. One of the nice things about icing so many rookies this year is that we got to see so many players that you think are probably going to be a decent part of our future play and get playing experience, but also not have to then be exposed in the Seattle expansion draft. We're not worried about losing them because first and second year players are exempt from the expansion draft. So guys like Adam Boqvist, Alec Regula, Dominic Kubalik, Ian Mitchell, Kirby Dach, Mackenzie Entwistle, Mike Hardman, Nicholas Beaudin, Philip Kurashev, Pius Suter, Reese Johnson, and Wyatt Kalynuk, they all played this season, but they're not going to be eligible to be picked by Seattle. So that's kind of nice. So the Blackhawks are pretty fortunate in that regard. They don't have to worry about using up protected slots for those players. But there are a couple players who will have to automatically be protected due to them having no move clauses in their contracts. So currently the Blackhawks have 4 players with no move clauses in their contracts: Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Brent Seabrook, and Duncan Keith. They would all have to be protected automatically unless they waived their no move clauses. Now, Brent Seabrook is an interesting case. He hasn't officially retired because he hasn't filled out the paperwork, but he's essentially retired. And due to precedents that was in the Vegas draft with guys in similar situations, the thought is that Brent Seabrook probably would be marked as exempt by the NHL, and so the Blackhawks wouldn't have to actually use up a protection slot for him. He could always just waive his no-move clause too if that is not the case. I mean, if the Kraken pick him, it's like, okay, he's not playing anymore. So I don't think he's going to be or have to be protected by the Blackhawks, but I have him just on here just as reference. So with that in mind, the Blackhawks at this point in time have protected 2 forwards, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, 1 defenseman in Duncan Keith, which means they have to protect 5 additional forwards, 2 additional defensemen, and a goaltender. So let's go through who I think the Blackhawks are most likely going to be protecting. For forwards, I have Alex DeBrincat, Alexander Nylander, Brandon Hagel, Dylan Strome, Henrik Borgstrom, Jonathan Toews, and Patrick Kane. For defensemen, I have Connor Murphy, Duncan Keith, and Nikita Zadorov. And for goaltender, I have Kevin Lankinen, which means the following notable players would be left exposed. Players like Adam Gaudette, Brett Connolly, David Kampf, Ryan Carpenter, Vinny Hinostroza, Calvin DeHaan, Riley Stillman, Colin Delia, and Malcolm Subban. Now, the guys who I've highlighted in red are players who don't have a contract for next season and beyond. Vinny Hinostroza is an unrestricted free agent. David Kampf and Adam Gaudette are both restricted free agents. So neither of those 3 players meet the exposure requirements to be picked in the Seattle expansion draft. However, there's a little bit of a gray area here. Seattle is allowed to pick up to 10 players who are in that situation, who are unrestricted free agents or don't have a contract for next season. So they could still potentially be picked, even though they do not officially meet the exposure requirements. Now, I think all 3 of those players are players that the Blackhawks would probably, rather keep. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Blackhawks make some sort of deal with Seattle, similar to what they did with the Vegas Golden Knights in terms of saying, hey, we want you to take Trevor Van Riemsdyk and we'll give you, Marcus Kruger and some other stuff, even though Van Riemsdyk and Kruger never even played for Vegas. But I could see the Blackhawks doing a similar thing here with maybe saying, hey, we'll give you, a couple draft picks or whatever if you pick, say, Calvin DeHaan instead of any of those 3 highlighted players. Although teams kind of made some mistakes going that route in the Vegas draft, it'll be interesting to see if maybe GMs have learned a thing or two since then. In their defense, the Vegas draft was the first draft in quite a long time, and those rules were brand new to expansion drafts in the NHL. But since the Seattle expansion draft is so soon after the Vegas draft and the rules are the exact same, you'd think that GMs will have learned a thing or two. We're probably not going to have another Florida situation again, but we'll see. Maybe there will be. With that said, if the Blackhawks don't make any sort of deal with Seattle and Seattle's just allowed to pick from the exposed players of the Blackhawks, here's the player I think Seattle will choose. I think the 24-year-old centerman Adam Gaudette will be picked by the Seattle Kraken, a player who the Blackhawks acquired at the trade deadline from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for Matthew Highmore. I think the Blackhawks would love to keep him, so I think Blackhawks are probably going to try and make some sort of move to maybe secure that protection. But if that doesn't happen, I can see him as the most likely guy picked by Seattle. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the Blackhawks situation for the upcoming Seattle Kraken expansion draft coming July 21st. I'd love to know what you guys think of it, what your thoughts are. Leave them down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Hockey Talkie. Thank you so much for waiting so long for this edition of Hockey Talkie. Like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate that as always. But most importantly, stay safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you next time.